New York Giants fans, Nick Falato here, excited about the addition of Deonte Banks at pick number 24. Joe Shane traded up one slot to secure the Maryland cornerback, and I am pumped for this because Deonte Banks fits what Wink Martindale wants to do. And as we saw, Wink Martindale was really excited about it. A press man corner with good size and very impressive athletic ability. Bringing up his mock draftable chart right here, we can see he had a 98th percentile broad jump, a 97th percentile vertical jump, a 92nd percentile 40-yard dash with an 89th percentile 10-yard split out of all the corners that have gone through mock draftable system since 1999. This is a very impressive player, and his tape checks out too. Now, he only had 2 interceptions in his career. He missed the majority of the 2021 season with a right shoulder injury, which is unfortunate, but as long as all these medicals checked out, this fit with Deonte Banks, the physicality, the toughness, the size, the length, the athletic ability, the temperament, first team all chirp, it's going to work out here in New York. Let's get into the tape. The first play I want to show is from 2019, where Deonte Banks intercepts giant quarterback great Brian Lewerke. You could see him up in press against Michigan State. Watch how he undercuts this skinny post, gets his eyes on the football, brings it in with one hand. I really just appreciate the overall athletic ability here. He opens his hips, and then watch right here. He's starting to flash his eyes on Brian Lewerke to see what his intentions are. He has his outside arm on the inside hip, his inside arm on the outside hip, and then right here he notices the football is coming, and watch how he just explodes right out of this stance in this position while the wide receiver has body position on him. That's a coordinated, balanced, highly talented type of play that requires a lot of concentration to haul in this football. And this is one of my biggest question marks about Deonte Banks' game, is the fact that he only has 2 interceptions in his college career. Does that mean he struggles to locate the football? Possibly, but right here is a very good indication that that's not the case. It's just we did not see this consistently throughout his time at Maryland. But I'll say this is a very good play to really highlight just how athletic and explosive this player is. It's a very rare type of athlete. And you're going to see that throughout a lot of these clips here. And you can see the end zone copy, comes away with that football, recollects his balance back when he had an extra 3 on his jersey. But let's fast forward to some of the movement skills that Banks showed frequently on Saturday, and here's one of them. This is an excellent speed turn. He stays on top of Marvin Harrison Jr. out of Ohio State, who's going to be a top 5 selection in next year's draft. After he motions in his direction, as we can see here, Banks gains a little bit of depth. He has his ass towards the sideline, outside leverage. He's just going to backpedal, and I just love how smooth he is. He opens his hips and starts to cut off this angle just in case Marvin Harrison Jr. ends up running a post here. So he has his hips open, his momentum is heading upfield, and just watch how balanced he is with this speed turn to stay on top of Marvin Harrison Jr. Just flips his hips right on top of it, and the ball goes out of bounds. That is so underrated, how well he moves here and how he's able to stay in phase on Marvin Harrison Jr., probably the best wide receiver in college football. It's a very balanced move. It's going to really come in handy playing within Wink Martindale's defense. Here we're going to see a really smooth click and close out of a back pedal. Watch how he just stays on top of Charlie Jones, who Deonte Banks held Charlie Jones, who's a very good wide receiver who will likely be selected early on day 3. Held him to 3 catches for 15 yards. Not a lot of cornerbacks in the country held Charlie Jones to that type of production. Here we're just going to see, watch, little back pedal. Watch right when he decides he's clicking and closing. Look how sudden that is. Just going to burst right back downhill. Jones ends up making this catch, which Charlie Jones always makes catches like this against top cornerbacks too. He did the same thing against Joey Porter Jr. Just love how he bursts out of that break. Here you're going to see him stay all over the Ohio State wide receiver. Again, Wink Martindale runs a lot of press. See, he sets to the outside, just flips his hips, gets right on that outside shoulder, rides it, stops with him. He's right on top of it, blanketing him, suffocating him. Play through the catch point, PBU. Here we get to see Banks handle some offensive creativity. See how he extemporizes when the play breaks down, and I love how he handles this little outside breaking route. Gets right back into phase, and then the wide receiver's like, you know what, I'm going to turn this upfield. I got all the space in the world. Banks gets right to that hip and then plays through the catch point for another PBU. I'll say this about Banks. There are times on tape where I feel like he face guards a bit, right? And that's one of my issues that come part and parcel with him maybe not having the best ball skills. But here he does get his head around at the last second. Sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he gets flagged. This was a player who was flagged 8 times last season. He can get grabby sometimes. He can face guard. But right here, you can see how he gets that initial outside hand up into the catch point, has contact on the wide receiver. It's not too egregious, and he locates that football, which is really important. He locates it, knocks it down, gets the PBU. I love to see when he does that. And there are a couple times against Wisconsin even where he's kind of late to get his head around. Then there were other times against Wisconsin, which we'll see here shortly, where he gets his head around very well. But here's a play where he's somewhat patient with his feet, doesn't have the best press technique all the time, but he's just walling this receiver off, not allowing him inside unless he takes this underneath path, which Deonte Banks is going to allow him to do so. He takes that underneath path, Banks squares right back up to him. Guess what, buddy? I have you covered. But then 11 tries to break back outside. You can see how he gets a little grabby there. Again, it's something that Banks does sometimes. But as Graham Mertz is rolling in this direction, Banks just gets right back into phase. And you can see that little move right there by the receiver, how he takes this step upfield, and then he goes down towards the boundary, towards the sideline. Banks doesn't really bite on that, and Banks is able to take that one step and then just redirect his weight and get right back to the hip and then play right through to get that PBU. That's a nice play right there by Deonte Banks. Underrated play. You can see how he does so. Watch how he waits to get the contact. That's good timing right there. Ref's right on top of it. Banks doesn't get flagged. If you're going to start in a Wink Martindale system, you're going to have to be able to flip your hips and carry the 9, carry the vertical route. Deonte Banks does that very well. Here you're going to see his second interception of his college career. This one came in 2022 against Indiana. You're going to see a bunch of clips of him just riding wide receivers close to the sidelines, squeezing them off the red line, using the positioning of the field against the wide receivers, and then getting up into the catch point. You can see this one right here. This is one of the ones I was talking about. Doesn't get his head around, doesn't get called for a flag, but just gets both of his hands up in the air, and the ball ends up going incomplete. But you can see a bunch of these, man. He's just carrying these guys. Just watch how easy and fluid he is when he turns. And then he has that speed just to restrict space, and that's what you need. You need the speed to restrict space. On this one, the ball kind of dies on Graham Mertz. You can see Deonte Banks isn't looking at the football. He isn't looking at the football. He's reading the wide receiver here. So he's not getting his head around. Again, not something that I love, but he's not getting his head around, but he's reading this wide receiver. He sees the wide receiver right now looking up at that football like, yo, that's mine. It's a little bit underthrown. Banks has the awareness to realize what the wide receiver is doing, so then he just throws his arm out in that direction and he knocks the football down right as it hits number 3's hands. It's a very good play by Deonte Banks, despite the fact that he did not look up and locate that football. You see another play against Wisconsin. This one he gets his head around and he squeezes 3 so tight off the red line. Again, similar type of alignment. He's in that press alignment. He's not jamming. Outside release, I'm just going to ride you really tight to the side. Look, 3 has like no operating space. Banks is all over him, and Banks easily locates this football. High points, doesn't come down with the interception, unfortunately, but still, he is in fantastic position, and he's in fantastic position quite often. You're going to see it again against Charlie Jones. Watch how he just runs this route for Charlie Jones, essentially, and he could have had so many more interceptions if he was better at securing the football. But here he ends up dropping it. Good defensive play by Charlie Jones. But just watch how he just gets underneath Charlie Jones and he runs this route. He's staying on top, staying on top, staying on top. Let me get my head around. Here he gets his head around, locates the football, and now he's in much better position than Charlie Jones is. This is the type of cornerback that you can leave out on an island, right? He has the type of athletic ability, the type of man coverage upside to cover guys one-on-one. You're going to need that when your defense runs 10% of their snaps in a cover 0 look, which is insane. No other defense has run cover 0 like Wink Martindale and like the New York Giants did in 2022. And here we're going to start to see some of the processing, because not only did Maryland run a lot of man coverage, they run a lot of pattern match. You need to be able to communicate, and Deonte Banks did that well. And here you can see this is going to be a wheel route. You're going to have a stack. And you're going to have the number 2 receiver who is off the line of scrimmage. He's going to come around on the wheel. Watch, this is a zone type of technique. As to the sideline, Deonte Banks is looking to see if there's any routes coming underneath that he can drive down on if this safety was going to cover over the top. But the wheel is taking Deonte Banks deep. So Deonte Banks is just going to feel that out. Once 4 starts to kind of get closer to that sideline, you can see Banks is inside the numbers. He's going to contact 4, and then he's going to flip his hips, and he's going to assume 4 as his responsibility. But Banks is still keeping those eyes active like he was a little bit earlier, and he sees this receiver break towards the sideline with all of these other Maryland defenders jumping up on this route underneath. So now it's Banks 2 versus 1, and Banks really does an excellent job coming off of his original assignment and knocking this football down out of Ohio State. That's a very smart and savvy play from Deonte Banks. You need to be spatially aware, and you need to have an overall sense of awareness about you as a football player to recognize that that is going on this late in a play, and then you go and you disrupt one of the best offenses in the league, almost come away with this turnover. The ball ended up hitting the ground, but damn did I love that play against Ohio State. And here, this isn't exactly a positive play, but it just speaks to the overall communication ability of Deonte Banks on this drag route against Charlie Jones, because you can see this is a mesh concept. So when you run a mesh concept, you're going to be passing a lot of these routes off. This is a 3-by-1 set for Purdue with the running back to the 3 receiver side. So Deonte Banks is on the X receiver, the backside X receiver, who's just going to be running a drag, and Deonte Banks isn't going to follow Charlie Jones through all of that traffic. He's going to pass him up to all of these adjacent defenders, and then he's going to assume the front side drag coming to the back side, and he's trying to point that and communicate that. And you can see that number 1 takes him a little bit to get it, and then nobody maintains any kind of presence on the tight end. I think that's Payne right there, but it doesn't really matter because the ball is not caught. But you can see the communication. That's kind of why I wanted to just bring this play about, just to highlight the type of responsibilities Deonte Banks had to execute, which we also see against Purdue right here in the red zone. This is a trap coverage. Look at the alignment of Deonte Banks, and you can also tell this is a 3-by-1 set. You have this safety. It's going to be a trap coverage because this safety is going to assume responsibility behind Deonte Banks if the number 2 or the number 3 go to the flat. You can see he is just ready to explode down towards the line of scrimmage to blow up anybody in the flat, and that is his responsibility. He is not lined up against the number 1 wide receiver like he wants the offense to think. And this is a player, Deonte Banks, who is explosive enough and I believe smart enough in terms of what he's doing on the football field to execute these types of trap coverages that can have your defense come away with some really critical interceptions. So let's watch this play. He doesn't get the interception, but you can see the number 2 and the 3 go to the flat, and watch how he adjusts. That's what I love, because this is the type of coverage where you're reading the route distribution of the wide receivers off the line of scrimmage. So Banks sees the 2, release outside. So his initial thought right here is, I need to go and attack this 2. And I love how he adjusts after he realizes that the quarterback isn't thrown to the 2, he's thrown to the 3, who's also running to the flat. And you can see that right here. He's jumping the 2, and now he's looking. He's like, the quarterback isn't looking over at the 2, so what's going on here? So then he just stops himself, knowing that he has 2 guys on the back end to cover both of these responsibilities, and then he just fires over to the 3, and he does not let the 3 beat him. And guess what? He plays through the catch point right there, makes a little bit of contact, no flag is thrown. It's a very, very smart and heady play from Deonte Banks, who adjusted on the fly. Got quads formation right here with this tight end in line, and watch how Banks is in a press alignment, but then right at the snap you can see how he bails a little bit. Outside leverage, allows this inside release, and also flashes his eyes to see if anybody else is coming to the flat. And you can see how he flips his hips here, and he gets his eyes to see what exactly is going on with these 2 wide receivers. But now he just starts to carry, and now he's midpointing, the 1 and the 2. What I mean by midpointing is he is split in between because this wide receiver also decided to release outside. So you're going to see how Banks flashes his eyes all around him, locating what the hell is exactly going on. You can see him do that. He sees that he has stayed over the top of this receiver, so now he's going to flash his eyes back to the 2 because he knows that this number 2 receiver had leverage from the beginning of the play against number 2 right here, the covering defender, who was midpointing kind of with his stance, the number 2 and the number 3. So this is a very smart play by Deonte Banks too. You see right here, his head is flashed towards the sideline. Okay, I'm on top of that. Let me see what's going on here. Let's see what the quarterback is doing. The quarterback is targeting the number 2. I can abandon the number 1. Let me close with on the number 2. Unfortunately, the wide receiver makes a very good catch, but you could see the processing that is going through Deonte Banks' mind right here. This is not something that is just easily understood by every defensive back, right? Like, he is understanding his role within this defense, his assignment, and assisting his teammates right here by playing through that catch point. Unfortunately, it was a catch by the receiver, but Banks was very, very close to getting another PBU. Now we're going to see him on the outside. He just does a really good job kind of getting in very good position and then flipping his head around. And I just want to show plays like that because, again, it was something I didn't see super often. But you can see in this specific play, Banks isn't even in position when the play starts. He is getting over there because the offense used tempo. Now you can just see him in the side straddle, has this receiver, is not threatened by this receiver undercutting him or anything like that. So he's just going to stay on top of it. He sees the quarterback, rear back throw the football. He just flips his hips, gets his eyes on it, throws out of bounds in great position. Now we're going to see Deonte Banks assuming a trail technique, and this is just unfortunate because this ends up being a catch. And what I mean by trail technique is you're going to see sometimes when cornerbacks allow wide receivers to blow right past them. That's because they have help over top. Right here you could see there is a defender who is splitting the hash and the numbers. He is going to be the help over top. So Deonte Banks is going to assume a trail technique, and in trail technique, you're basically forcing the quarterback to be very precise and throw with touch because he has to put it over the top of you into a relatively restricted area of the field, restricted space. So you can see right there, he allows the receiver to run past him. He's slow with just kind of turning around, and then he explodes, gets to that inside hip. He knows he has help over the top, so he's not worried about getting beat over the top. And he gets that hand on the football. Good play by Deonte Banks, but he tips it up to the wide receiver, and the wide receiver ends up catching it. Here's another view of that same exact play. You see, gets that hand on it. He's in great position. There's really no way number 6 can catch this football unless Deonte Banks pops it up in the air like that or he gets mossed, which doesn't happen. And then the wide receiver ends up just securing it. Another thing I love about Banks is he's not tentative. He will be physical, and he is a tough football player. And I think having that type of physical toughness, and I'm just going to run through a bunch of plays of him showing that, him diagnosing screens coming downhill, him in run support. I think all of those traits, physical toughness, your ability in run support, even as a corner, it's important. If you think about even the Giants last year, they sucked at stopping stuff on the edge, but Adoree Jackson, low-key, was actually really good in run support. Darnay Holmes, pound for pound, is very, very strong and very tough in run support. And as you're seeing here on the screen, there's a bunch of plays with Deonte Banks right there. That's one of my favorite ones. Comes off the block, the stalk block, and then makes his tackle and kind of looks like he's about to like suplex his dude on the ground, but just kind of drops him. But I want a cornerback with that type of edge and with that type of mentality that he isn't going to allow some running back to run through his face. He is going to get dirty. He is going to stick his nose in. And Deonte Banks has that. I can't say that about every cornerback in this draft class. There are corners who are being discussed in the first round, who are being discussed in the second round, who I don't think like to tackle. They don't embrace the contact. Deonte Banks, he will tackle, and I appreciate that. Now, here are 2 plays I'm going to show. Something I saw in film, and I cut up 2 clips of it, that I don't think it's a pervasive problem throughout his profile, but it's something to be aware of, and it's something that I believe Jerome Henderson will coach out of him. His press technique sometimes could use a little bit of refinement, how he employs his hands, his footwork. He commits his hips a little early sometimes, so just little things like this. This play isn't necessarily indicative of it because the wide receiver has already entered his outside stem off the line of scrimmage, but you can see how Deonte Banks typically does a very good job staying on top of these wide receivers. He allows this wide receiver to cut right back underneath him. And it wasn't because I think Deonte Banks believed that this player was going to be here. This is a slant-flat combo. He is flowing to the flat side, even though it is a boundary side. So maybe Banks did think that, so he thought he could play it over aggressively. But you could see how the wide receiver was able to cut right back towards him. The ball was just terribly thrown because Wisconsin is not the best offense. Incomplete pass. And I didn't think this was a huge issue, but it also came up a couple other times in some other games. This one is a little bit more of an example. I feel like that is a better representation of what I'm trying to articulate. You can see how his feet, they start to open up, and now he's completely horizontal, right? And this wide receiver never really fully committed to the outside, so that's just being a little bit overeager, a little bit undisciplined with your hips. I think that is correctable. But you can see how the wide receiver across his face makes a catch. Deonte Banks is right there to make the tackle because that's what Deonte Banks does. I feel like it was necessary to highlight those little issues. And now here are just some of the touchdowns that Deonte Banks surrendered. This one's a fade ball. It's a nice pass. Again, this is press technique. You can see how Deonte Banks inches inside. This is a good little release off the line of scrimmage. So you can see how the wide receiver angles inside, and that allows the wide receiver to have space on the fade because Deonte Banks inches towards the inside and gives him a little bit more breathing room. You can see right as he employs his jam, the wide receiver just goes right to the outside, and it's just a nice play by the Indiana wide receiver. And now here you're going to have one in the slot, where the Michigan slot guy is going to catch a touchdown. And then you have one against Grant DeBose, who's going to be a day 3 pick, where Deonte Banks just kind of loses off the line of scrimmage and press. DeBose does a really good job kind of fighting through to get to the outside. But even in this position, Deonte Banks is in a good spot, but DeBose uses a little bit of contact to his advantage, and the throw was just perfect. Sometimes you'll lose in those situations, and I'm not going to hold that against Deonte Banks, who I believe is a very good football player. And like I said, everyone, I'm very happy that the New York Giants were able to get Deonte Banks. He was one of the guys that I said several times throughout this pre-draft process is it's a home run. It's a grand slam. It's an excellent situation if he's there. But honestly, I did not think he was going to be there at pick 25. The New York Giants, to me, they lucked out. As long as the medicals check out here, they provided Wink Martindale that press man cornerback that they so desperately needed to help this defense flourish now and in the future. Thank you so much, everyone, for checking us out. If you have not done so already, please head on over to bigblueview.com, where we have all of our written content. There's a ton of stuff we are doing over there about the New York Giants draft picks, about the 2023 NFL draft in general, and of course, about the New York Giants in general. So we're really excited about that. So please, if you like the New York Giants, if you like the draft, if you like the NFL, head on over to bigblueview.com. Thank you so much. I am Nick Falato signing off. Let's go Giants.